Right, guys, here we are, episode 1 of the Ridgeline Shakedown review. So today we're starting out, obviously first episode, something a little bit special for everybody. We got the Fabric National Mk20 Sniper Support Rifle. So this part of the series, we're mostly going to be covering the semi-automatic sniper systems. So we're starting with this bad area right here. Now, this is a sniper system, but it's a little bit different than kind of like our traditional bolt actions. These are kind of designed with a little bit different intent in mind. What we're really looking to do is find this balance between what's acceptable accuracy and precision with the context of speed inside of a certain distance. Let's go ahead and look at kind of the background so we get a little bit better understanding of what the semi-automatic sniper systems are really designed to do. Because like I said before, they differ in their operational context and what we normally use traditional bolt action systems for. So, as everybody kind of knows, the last 2 decades, the global war on terror has been raging solid. The great global war of terror. So what we kind of found that there was this paradigm shift that began to occur in sniping, particularly within special operations. You started seeing snipers employed quite often in support of what we call direct action operations. So these direct action operations, a lot of times as a sniper, you're supporting the assault element. So you're typically much closer than most of your normal sniper interdiction activities. A lot of times you're very close to the objective. Typically anywhere inside of 600, and there's even been times where I've been inside of 100 meters of the objective. And a lot of times what we're dealing with terms of target engagements is we're looking at having to engage targets that are a limited exposure, whether that's in a time exposure or even a size exposure of the target itself. So from there, when we look at how the traditional weapon systems kind of employ, we kind of start to run into some issues. So for one, when we're close into the objective like that, you end up oftentimes being inside of a threat weapon's range. So that kind of puts you in a dicey situation. And additionally, you also end up with the potentiality for there to be a lot of targets appearing in a very short amount of time. So when we're looking at using these systems in support of direct action, we start to run into some issues with the older traditional bolt action systems. A lot of times their accuracy is more than adequate, but you start to run into capacity issues. So whether you're talking about the M40 series or the M24, you really start topping out at 5 or maybe 10 rounds with those systems. And when we get close in where you have a lot of targets in very short time periods, what we do with the semi-automatic systems is we trade a little bit of that downrange accuracy for a reliable, fast-feeding system with a higher capacity. On top of that, when you get into some of these closer support roles, you also start putting yourself at a greater risk when it comes to threat weapon employments. So, like I said, you're much closer to objective areas, which means there's a good chance you might find yourself in a toe-to-toe gunfight when you don't want to. With the traditional bolt-action systems, it doesn't take a rocket surgeon to figure out that running a bolt gun inside of a house doing CQC is less than ideal. So what we kind of ended up doing for a long time is we would run the bolt gun for sniper operations, and then you'd carry an additional carbine for any sort of movement to and from the target, or should something occur and you need to defend yourself in extremis. If you got really frisky and you wanted to play the cards, you could always just run just a pistol, but neither one of those are really optional. Pistol, you end up giving up a lot of your lethality, and with a carbine, you start really reducing your survivability from the aspect that you are now being more encumbered. You have a whole nother weapon system with a whole nother ammunition source that you have to feed. So it starts to kind of complicate your decision making. So with that operational paradigm shift, what we ended up really moving to for a lot of this direct action support was the semi-automatic sniper system. Essentially, you get one gun to rule them all. Well, not really, because everything's always a compromise. Like I said at the beginning, with the semi-automatic sniper systems, what we're doing is we're balancing what we might consider the acceptable accuracy that we need to accomplish the mission with the ability to deliver a much higher rate of fire, if necessary, in extremis, defend ourselves with these rifles. So when it comes to that compromise in regards to accuracy, semi-automatic systems kind of get hung up on two prominent points. One, just mechanically speaking, it is much more difficult to apply the fundamentals of marksmanship to these systems. You have a lot of reciprocating mass, moving parts, you have extended lock times and dwell times, and it just makes it that much harder for you to shoot it. The other piece of this is mechanically, these guns are kind of built to a little bit looser tolerances. So that's kind of out of this necessity for reliability. So while you could produce a gun that is, semi-automatic and produces very good accuracy, maybe almost on par with a bolt gun system, you start to really risk your reliability with that system, especially when you get into austere environments. You have to have a little bit of play in the parts in order for it to be able to run itself well. All right, so let's look at accuracy. That's the big question. What is the acceptable standard for a system like this? What makes it actually usable? In regards to that, we kind of look at doctrinally, like a rifle system like the M110 has a stated accuracy requirement of having an average mean radius of 0.68 inches at 100 yards. Now, what the hell is a mean average radius? That simply means that out of a 5-shot group, the average radius from that center can be no more than that 0.68 inches. So it kind of gives you a little bit of leeway, but if you were to kind of convert that to like a minutes of angle, you'd be looking at a system that is averaging approximately like a 1.3 minutes of angle at 100 yards. Now I know what you're thinking. 1.3 MOA is pretty atrocious in this internet age of super snipers that are out there. 1.3 MOA is not like a standard threshold most of us are really going to be satisfied with, especially when you're looking at a bolt gun. But in the context of what a gas gun is meant for, again, we're looking at, distances out to 6, maybe 800 yards, but a lot of that work is going to be 600 and in, and we're looking at anatomically sized targets, which kind of offer us a decent bit of leeway. And again, that 1.3 is what's acceptable. Most of these systems will do a little bit better than that. But that 1.3 is kind of that threshold, doctrinally speaking, of what these systems should produce at a minimum, while maintaining reliability. All right, so let's get down to the nuts and bolts of what's going on with the Mark 20. Starting off, let's look at the length and the weight of this system. So the weight of this system, as it's configured right now, pretty much operational ready, we're looking at right around 14 pounds, which I personally think is a pretty good balance point for a system like this. If you go heavier, the rifle does become easier to shoot in terms of your ability to mechanically apply the fundamentals of marksmanship. However, you start to lose some mobility with that system. It becomes a little bit unwieldy. Vice versa, if we go lighter, we can get these systems a little bit lighter, but the recoil starts to make applying the fundamentals a little bit more difficult, although you gain a little bit of maneuverability and it becomes less wieldy of a system. All right, let's turn it over to the length. So this guy is sitting right at about 42 inches. That's a little bit on the longer end of what I like to do, especially if we're going to be running a system that is suppressed. This is 42 inches without a suppressor. If we throw a suppressor on here, we could easily be creeping up towards that 50-inch mark, which makes a system like this a little bit unwieldy when we start getting into confined places. I would say that the length as is right now is kind of right at the threshold of what would be acceptable. So with the length established, let's look at why this thing is so long. As you can see, most of this rifle's length has to do with the barrel. Now, a 20-inch barrel in a 7.62 gun like this, to me, seems a bit unnecessary. Well, it's nice, you're going to get a little bit more velocity. You end up sacrificing a little bit of that mobility, especially when you start throwing a can on stuff. For me, I'm kind of a big fan of the shorter barrels, either a 16 or in this case, we got right here is a 14-inch barrel that's kind of cut down to size. With a can on there, you're at the same size you are with a unsuppressed 20-inch barrel. Okay, so if any of you guys are familiar with the Mark 17 or the SCAR H, you already start to notice a lot of similarity trends between the 17 and the 20. Just looking at the barrel itself, you'll notice one thing that's kind of different is while you still have the same quick change barrel system, instead of the 2-screw trunnion that you see on the Mark 17, the Mark 20 has a 3-screw trunnion. Also, the barrel extension is a little bit more beefier, and the barrel profile itself is a little bit heavier than what you find on the Mark 17. They've kept pretty much the same 2-position gas block, which is great for reliability, whether you're running unsuppressed or suppressed. And interestingly enough, they stuck with the 1 in 12 twist rate. So 1 in 12 is a little bit tad slow for 7.62, especially when you start getting into some of the heavier projectiles that you might find in the AB39 or the M118LR, but 1 in 12 will work. Moving on from the barrel, let's talk about the receiver for a moment. So somewhat similar again to the Mark 17, but as you can see, it's been extended out. So this gives us the added benefit of extended rail space where we can mount laser rangefinders, laser illuminators, universal night sight systems for shooting at night, all of which is kind of a big added benefit over the 17, which had a very small footprint in which you could actually mount them. Moving back in the receiver, the operating system pretty much remains the same. The only subtle difference is the Mark 20 is a semi-automatic only platform, so no happy switch there. This one has been outfitted with a Geisley Super SCAR trigger, along with a Parker Mountain Machine fire control kit, which is pretty sweet. Lastly, moving back towards the stock, this is where we see a big difference from the Mark 17. The buttstock on the Mark 17 is what I would call minimalist. The upgrade that we have going on here is we have just good old-fashioned height of comb and length of pull adjustments that are all toolless. Now, if you've seen any of the other videos that we've done on setting precision rifles up, you'll probably remember how important it is to be able to fit the individual rifle to the individual operator in order to get the most usability out of a system. Also, before we move on, we'll take a quick moment and talk about the optics package that we have in place. So this package is something you're going to see pretty much on any other reviews of the semi-automatic sniper systems that we have out here, just to kind of keep the playing field as level as we can. So what we got here, we have a Night Force 4 to 16 power ATACR mounted in a Geisley Super Precision mount. That's also outfitted with the Ridgeline R2 45-degree offset with a Leopold Delta Point Pro. This platform with this optic is kind of what I consider the optimum setup when it comes to power ranges, the weight, and the footprint size of an optic. This is where it's at. The ammunition that we're going to be using for the duration of this testing is the Federal Gold Medal Match 175 grain Sierra Match King. So this is a pretty good accurate representation of what's being fielded in the force right now with the AB39, which is also loaded by Federal with the 175 grain Sierra Match King. So let's talk about the testing criteria before we get hot and heavy. We want to be able to test this system in context of what it was actually meant for. So when we look at this, we're going to be looking at it and reviewing it from the context of what sort of accuracy is it capable of, and how does this thing run if we have to press it into a close quarters environment like in an extremis situation. For that accuracy and precision review, we're going to conduct a 3-part test. One, we're going to look at the cold bore shift, if this rifle in fact has one. Then we're going to be following it up with a 5-round group series on a group therapy target. That should help us kind of establish whether or not this rifle meets that accuracy threshold of 1.3 MOA over the duration of several groups. Lastly, we're going to put it on a tripod and conduct a point of aim, point of impact evaluation to see if there's any sort of shift when firing from alternate positions, such as a tripod or off of barricades. Following the accuracy and precision review, we're going to shake this down in a MUSOC Phase 1 rifle qualification. Now, that Phase 1 qualification is usually done with a carbine that's sighted with either a red dot or an LPVO. Not exactly meant for running a sniper system through, but if we can achieve 80% in the time standards, That kind of tells me that this may be a viable option for an operator to use in extremis during a close quarter battle engagement. Lastly, we're going to tie it all together with a little drill I call the 21 gun salute. So that's going to be 21 targets, unknown distance from 100 all the way out to 600 yards, as fast as we can go. That's going to mimic the operational target-rich environment that sometimes these systems are used in. So without further ado, let's get into it and see how the Mk20 sniper support rifle shakes down. All right guys, so here we are getting ready to conduct our precision and accuracy test. Now we got a quick rough zero, leveled out the optics, made sure everything's at 0-0. So we're going to go right into it. We let the gun cool down. We're going to conduct that cold bore, and then we're going to conduct five round groups on our group therapy target. And then we'll roll right into that tripod, 5 rounds off the tripod at the B8 repair center. See if we get any sort of shift. All right, let's get it on. All right, so there's the cold bore. Now we go for group therapy. All right. Next up, tripod. All right guys, so here we are. We did our accuracy and precision review. So let's kind of talk about what happened and go through the targets. So we started out up here with our cold bore target, kind of get a feel for what this rifle does when we come straight into it. So cold bore shot, landed kind of low over here, followed up with additional 4 rounds. So if we take this cold bore shot and we slide it over here and kind of superimpose it within the other group, you can see it's within the margin of error for that shot group. Now interestingly, we started out, including that cold bore, that first group was a 1.22 MOA. So from there we went straight into our group therapy. We did 5 round groups down here because we really want to see what this thing can do and what it can handle in terms of heat as it starts to build up. For example, if we're in a rapid engagement scenario, what's going to happen to our group? Is it going to open up? Is it going to shift? And you can kind of see right here, we start incrementally growing in group size. So we started out with that 1.22. As we came down here, you can see it was still fairly tight, but it started opening up. We got a 1.4. From there, we jump over here. We're now at about 15 rounds in, and we end up at a 1.78. And we start hovering between that 1.4 and like almost a 1.8 as we kind of go around the clock here. Interestingly, what else I kind of started to experience with this rifle is the lower receiver is plastic, and it has a kind of weird flex to it when you're behind it. Now, mechanically speaking, the optic is mounted directly to the rail and the barrel trunnion connects to the rail. That part, mechanically speaking, you know, the movement of a plastic receiver should not really affect the cold, hard mechanical accuracy of a system. However, as a shooter, your interface to it it is noticeable as you start to load different tensions into the gun, and it's weird. I'm not gonna lie. It feels awkward. I can feel the natural point of aim gun shifting, even inside of the group. I'll fire 1, 2, and then I'll feel a sudden shift in my natural point of aim, where now my optic kind of shifted a little bit, and I now have to shift my head behind it. And I think that's really what you start to see here, as the natural point of aim is kind of marked here, the center with the X. You start to see that shifting around. That's happening back at the gun. Like, I can feel that happening, which really, I don't know, it has yet to be determined, I think, with this gun, whether you should be loading kind of heavy into it or holding more of a light load. I kind of went with a real medium load in this, and I could still feel like that flexing in the receiver. From there, we drop down into our tripod point of aim versus point of impact evaluation. So a lot of times with these semi-automatic systems, when we get them up on tripods, or you're shooting off some sort of obstacle or barricade, depending on where you're putting tension into that rail, even though they're free-floating systems, it can still have an effect because that rail is connected to that barrel nut. And a lot of times when you load in to different surfaces, going from like a prone position into, you know, standing off a barricade or sitting off a tripod, you'll have slight shifts. And that's really what I kind of wanted to see with this. So we did, 5 rounds, slow fire from the tripod seated position. And you can see, again, I was still feeling that flex, that weird flex with the lower receiver. And I could feel the natural point of aim shifting around. But overall, I didn't really see any major shifts coming off of the tripod itself. A lot of times you'll see a vertical component where the group will usually shift down. Most commonly, that's the direction of shift you'll have, kind of coming off a tripod or barricade. In this case, you can see vertical, not really a lot going on. Most of that flexing, like I said, was kind of coming in that left and right. So overall, again, just to recap, cold bore really doesn't seem to manifest itself. We'd probably do a few more tests, a few more runs of this to actually collect a series of data points to confirm that. But right out of the gate here, I'm not really seeing much. Accuracy-wise, kind of questionable, especially as we apply heat to the gun. I think it does well when the barrel's relatively cool, but when we get into strings of fire, in this case, 30 rounds deep, we start to see those groups opening up. And then tripod doesn't look like it's terribly affected in terms of the point of aim shifting. But again, that weird flexing in the receiver, not sure if I really like that. It might take a while to get comfortable. It could possibly help produce better groups, but really I think the biggest component here is heat. All right, guys, we're now ready. We got the target set up for the MUSOC Rifle Qual Phase 1. It's going to be a total of 24 rounds. Let's go ahead and run it and see how it shakes out. All right, guys, we just finished up the MUSOC Qualification Course of Fire Phase 1. So we ran this cold. I didn't do any practice before this. We ended up 24 rounds. We had 20 hits. If it's inside the circle, it breaks the circle, it's a hit. That gives us a score of 83%, which is passing. I mean, honestly, it's not my best work. Running it cold is not exactly easy. On top of that, this is a lot of gun to try to drive like a carbine. One, just getting the gun up on target. You know, we're driving a 14-pound rifle versus a 7 or 8-pound carbine. And then your recoil impulse. It's almost 3 times what you're getting with a 5.56 gun. So those split times, they're a little bit slower. You know, just running a straight flash hider, no KN or anything. It's doable, but as you can see, it's pretty challenging. I think we could get that score way better. You know, typically with a carbine, I'm running, you know, right around 94 to 96s when I run it cold. So 83 is not bad for where we're at. This gun can be used in extremis situations in close quarters combat. Again, obviously not ideal, but it can be done. All right, guys, here we are getting ready to do 21 gun salute. It's 21 rounds in the rifle, 21 targets, all unknown distance from 100 all the way up to 600 yards as fast as we can. We're going to do it all in one take and let the chips fall where they fall, see how this rifle shakes down at distance. I can feel this thing flexing back here. Coming loose. Right, guys, so started to do 21 gun salute and I was just like, what the is going on? Something in the receiver and the lockup between me and the gun was just not correct. And so a little bit of troubleshooting, took it apart, and these 2 bolts that attach the stock to that rear plate had come loose. Now we've tightened it back up. We're gonna see what it looks like. I think this could have to do with some of that shifting in that natural point of aim. I don't know for 100% if it's the lockup here. Definitely was not helping. But ready to tighten it back up. We're gonna go back into it and see what happens. All right, guys, so we just finished up the 21 gun salute. That's 21 rounds at 21 different targets from 0 all the way out to 600 yards. We ended up with a total of 19 hits, which gives us a hit probability right around 90%, which overall isn't too bad. One thing, again, I started to notice, even after tightening up the screws on the buttstock, I was still feeling that flex in the lower receiver, which was making it kind of weird as I was trying to drive the gun in a really quick manner from target to target. I could definitely feel this weird wobbling of the natural point of aim. Obviously the gun is still functional in this capacity of, rapid engagement of multiple targets. So still functional, although I have to admit it's not the best feeling semi-automatic sniper system I've ran in this capacity. All right guys, so overall, if you think this was a pretty decent review, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We'll be doing more rifles in the semi-automatic sniper system series, as well as we'll have other guests come on that will be running carbines and pistols, all that sort of stuff. We're gonna have similar formats to this so you can actually get a real good, decent idea of how these different weapon systems shake down in the context that they're actually meant for. Until next time, guys, be safe, be dangerous, and I'll catch you on the flip side. All right, I'm warming up. This is gonna take one. Kind of like taking one gun and ruling them all. Nope, that's wrong. Token's rolling in his grave right now. That was good. Positive talks, Rudy. I find myself using a lot of additionally. From the top. So what do we got going on here? Well, we got 20 inches of cold hammer forged, chrome lined, free floated goodness. Is that suffering? I felt like it was suffering. We got a wicked long barrel in here. We got 20 inches of cold hammer forged, chrome lined goodness, free floated up here in the front. You know what I'm trying to say. This is not coming out. Chrome lined steel goodness that's going to be providing us with, I don't know what the saying. I got the one part down. I didn't know where I was going with it. We're getting there. We're winding down. Boom.